Well, my name is Michel Engu Dobbs. Engu means complete fool, and it's a lot to aspire to, you know. My teacher was Peter Muriel Matheson, who was Bernie Glassman's first Dharma heir, and I was Murio's first Dharma heir. So, and I've been practicing for a while. Not as long as you though, Tyson. I think probably for maybe about 35 years or so. So if I get anything wrong, please feel free to jump in and correct me. And my understanding is, and please correct me, but that tonight we're going to talk about Zazen. Here's this. Such a funny thing, because I think that I'd been practicing for maybe 5 or 6 years before I talked to anyone about Zazen. Well, I started in a Rinzai tradition, and it was sort of like the type of place where in New York City, Soho Zendo, and the teacher was Kyudo Roshi, who was from Japan, but he would only be there for usually a month or two a year, and the rest of the time it was just this place where we showed up to sit and meditate. I came from a socialist and atheist background, so to go to any kind of a religious place was like, deeply troubling, kind of. And for a while, I convinced myself that I wasn't going to a religious place, but I would have a really hard time when people chanted sutras and things like that. It felt like a little churchy and creepy to me. And then, who knew? I became a priest, and I've been deeply touched by ritual, by all of our liturgy, and I really have found it open my heart in a big way. So I'm really grateful for that. But again, Zen practice, like, what are you doing when you're sitting there, right? What's this all about? And that is what it's all about. If you take away all of the liturgy and the ritual, because all of that stuff is to get you to a place where, in my understanding, that you're completely present with what you're doing, and not stuck up in your ideas and thoughts and opinions about what you're doing, but that you let go and are just doing what you're doing. And when you are able to, if you are able to, and if you even care to do that, it's incredible. It opens up the world in a big way, I find. And so, but what do we do when we're just sitting? What is it? And so I wanted to offer to you several different practices that I've done and that I still do, some, and then we can try them for a couple of minutes each, not for too long. I think that in all of Zazen, the three things that are very important, and they're not vitally important, as a good friend of mine who is in a wheelchair points out, like sometimes you can't do them. And so, it's always important to know we don't have fixed rules. That's one thing, right? And but these practices are helpful. And so oftentimes Zazen is, the 3 points of Zazen are body, breath, and mind, right? So body, it's really, they're not separate, by the way. Body, breath, and mind are completely linked together, right? But we can take them up as 3 touch points to keep us in our practice, right? You can just sit on a cushion and and daydream, you know. You probably will. I sometimes do. Or you can plan, you know, your weekend or whatever, right? But what is it that we're actually trying to do, right? I think that what we're trying to do is what I said at the beginning there, right? Is to drop off all of, to get, we're not trying to block any of the things that are coming up. We're not trying to push them away even, right? But we are trying to learn to bring our focus back and our attention back. We'll just time after time, breath after breath, to a direct experience of this moment. And this moment is not some abstract thing like this. It's like not, it's this moment and whatever's in it, right? I remember a wonderful Zen teacher, Tenkei Kopens, who has a Sangha in the Netherlands, one time saying to me, you know, when you're being a priest, you're just taking care of this moment. And when you're doing liturgy, that may mean how you light the incense, that you're doing it with your complete attention, you know, how you light it and put it into the bowl, how you bow at the altar, how you then come around and do your bows, how you chant, right, and how you sit. So bringing us to that, just, and so all of these practices that we may do, really that's their goal, is to bring us into this direct relationship with this moment, which moment after moment becomes this life. Yeah. So we don't take care of the future by sitting there and making plans about like, oh, at 3 o'clock we take care of it by taking care of right now and trusting that that will get us to 3 o'clock, you know, in a good way, you know. And so the first practice that is the most the kind of often thought of as a beginner's practice, but it's not at all, is called Susakan. Susakan is counting your breaths, right? The way that it was taught to me is that when each time you breathe on your exhalation, you count 1. Then the next one, you count 2. Up to, now you can go, sometimes when I taught this in prison to guys who were like 18, I wanted to keep it pretty simple, right? So I would say just go up to 4 and then start again at 1. And because one of the things that you'll find is that you get to 4 and then you get to 20 and you realize you forgot to. So part of the practice of Susakan, that's a really wonderful practice, is how do you deal with not getting it right? And the way that you deal with not getting it right is to start again, you know? And so when you find yourself, you know, and you're at 150 and but you've got your dinner menu planned out for the whole week, then you go, instead of going like, I'm an idiot and I can't believe it, I'm not good enough to do this, like you just, without judgment and gently, you come back to 1 and you go back to 4, you know. In our tradition, we did koan study, and I'm not going to talk about that here because that's something that is a little more complicated. But one of the prerequisites to do koan study was that we would count to 100 and back down, and doing susakan, right? This breathing, and you're not really controlling your breath. You're not forcing it to be long or deep, or you're just breathing, noticing the quality of it, feeling it, and counting it, right? And keeping track of it, right? And if you do Susakan, I did it for a long time. And I remember going to my first teacher, Kyudo Roshi, and saying, you know, I've gotten so good at counting my breath that I could actually like count it while I'm reading a book, or or you know, or being completely distracted. And the look that he gave me, he didn't really say anything. He just gave me this like withering look that I still remember. You know, like, okay, you're not getting it, go back to one. So it's a wonderful practice. You can read about Susakan. It's spelled Sussokan. And there are like fundamentalists about Susakan that have written, older Japanese teachers who have written like these long treatises on why and how to do it, and how to do it wrong and how to do it right. But it shouldn't be that difficult, in my opinion. It's just breath, counting your breath. And the reason that you do it is because it focuses your mind, and as you focus your mind gets quiet eventually, right? Maybe. And again, so I'm going to jump right into the next practice, which is shikantaza. Shikantaza is just sitting, just sitting. Shikantaza is just sitting with complete attention to everything. So it's not an easy practice. Some people say, I'm doing shikantaza, and I'm like, oh, well, you know, keep trying. And honestly, it's a profound and deep practice of just accepting what's happening, what's arising, each thing and it has to do more with the Soto style of just taking care of this moment, right? So it's not taking care, it's just being aware and paying attention to this moment is shikantaza. And oftentimes, if you do susakan, if you do this breath work, right, and you're counting your breaths, you may get to a place where you're suddenly quiet, more quiet. Maybe, you know, it's not a goal. And one of the big things in shikantaza is it's a practice without a goal. You don't get to have a goal. The goal is to just be here. And by the way, like, I remember one time being with Bernie, and Bernie had us a whole big circle of Zen teachers, maybe 100 people were there, and he had us all go around and say, like, what's the fundamental practice that you know, think is the most important thing? And, you know, people would say, just being here now. And he said, okay, like, anybody who's not here now, please raise your hand, you know. and so it's not like some magical thing, you know, to be here now. You actually are here now. It's actually paying attention to it and being aware of it, of this natural state that all of us already have. It's our birthright. Sandro, please, if anything I'm saying is like a little difficult or needs repeating, you will let me know, yes? Tudo bem. Good, thank you. So that's shikantaza susakan. The other practice that I found really wonderful is listening practice. And listening practice, so Dogen Zenji talks about turning the light around, right? Normally our attention is focused on everything in, you know, everything outside, like so-called outside of us, right? And we're like, you know, and Dogen Zenji talks about turning that light around and shining it in, you know, and looking at what is this that's thinking that it's apart from all of these things around it. Yes. So listening, just really listening deeply to and first to your own breathing. Because even if you're breathing silently and quietly, there's noise associated, there's some, so really listening to it until you get so quiet you basically just disappear, is how I would express it. It is a practice that I found always very useful, you know. So those are three practices that I think are wonderful practices to start with, and not just to start with, but to go on and on with, you know. Honestly, like as I was, at the Zendo tonight, sitting for about an hour, and then, and so as I was there, and honestly not thinking about what I was supposed to be doing, I wasn't thinking about what I was going to say to you guys, but it did come up a little bit, and so, but I thought that, offering these three practices, they're practices that I still do, and as I found myself thinking about like all the brilliant things that I would say to you tonight, I would just come back, right? So for a while I started and I counted my breaths and I counted to 10, then I counted to 10 and back down to and this is like sort of a confession. I've found in practicing over the years that whatever I do that gets me to around to sitting zazen for roughly 20 minutes or so is where things start to really shift for me and get quiet. So I might need to count or follow my breaths. Oftentimes I don't need to, I've been doing it for a while, so I don't have to. I kind of fall right in, but sometimes I'm distracted or upset about something, and so then I'll use one of these three practices to kind of quiet down, and then in that quietness, that's for me is where those practices are, all three of them. Well, maybe not the Susakan, maybe not the counting, right? But the other two, shikantaza and listening, deep listening, are both happening. Like, and I'm able to find their peace, or peace finds me, is a better way to put it. And that peace is always here, but often I'm not, right? So bringing ourselves together is a really enjoyable and nice process. So what I'd like to do, how long is this supposed to be? Anyone want to tell me? Is it about an hour? Okay, great. So what I'd love to do with you is to actually do a little bit of each of those three practices together. I'll ring a bell, and when we're done, I'll ring a bell again. But before we do that, I'd like to ask if you have any questions or concerns or observations. No, good. You're a great student. Richard, not even you? Okay.
No questions.
Okay, good. And Jennifer's otter pilot is good. Okay, so let's start out with the breath counting, yeah? And I am not a big believer, although I've done a little bit of it in the prison. I did a little of it with the young men, but I'm not a big believer in giving directions during meditation. I was always the person who was sitting and going like, would you just be quiet so I can it doesn't help me if you're talking me into quietness. Like, that doesn't work for me. So I'm going to suggest, though, start out with counting to 4, right? Tai-san, you can go up to 10. You've been doing it for 40 years. You know, if you're comfortable with it and if you feel good about it, go up to 10. I've always liked counting backwards also because it really forces you to pay attention in a slightly different way. And then when we're done, we'll just do about 5 minutes. And then when we're done, I'll ask you for how it felt and if you have any comments or okay. So I'm gonna just light a little bit of incense here for myself. Okay, and unfortunately, none of my more beautiful instruments are right at hand, but I do have this is the bell that in Dokusan, a Dokusan bell. So Dokusan is when you come in to see the Zen teacher. And so let that be the start. I do suggest keeping your eyes lowered but open, sitting up straight, kind of pushing your hara, your tanden, which is your lower belly, out a little bit and breathing into there, and your back kind of push back, and the top of your head like it's held up by a string. So, any anything come up? Ian, how about for you? How was that?
It was okay. That was my first time with my eyes open that I've been. Although, like I said, this is really new to me. Which was interesting. I definitely had to restart several times, and I'm still working on getting quiet, and have only found it a few times. So, um, but I do like the focus I got from counting backwards a bit.
Hmm, great, thank you. And yeah, so for us, closing the eyes or opening the eyes is an interesting thing. A lot of the times, closing the eyes, our practice is a practice of embodiment, right? Not a practice of transcendence. We're not trying to get out of this life or get out of this moment or get something different even. We're trying to be fully present and embodied. And so the practice of keeping your eyes open kind of does encourage you to notice if there's like a lion, in the room. or it's part of your whole experience, right? And it also, I think sometimes closing the eyes because we're so not used to being relaxed. And a lot of the times when we start to meditate, it's like the first time we really start relaxing, and that can lead to to sleep, to kind of drifting off, right? So keeping your eyes open encourages you to be here, and to keep coming back here where you actually are. Yeah. How about you, Sandro?
Well, I was okay. I used to meditate with open eyes, and um, I receive a instruction that could be helpful. Um, this thing to open the eyes or not. If you're thinking, if you're very noisy, you can close the eyes. If you uh, is tired and um, maybe you will be uh, snoring after you start to the meditation. It's better open the eyes
Yeah,
and see um, really open eyes. But if you not so, if you have not a so noisy mind or not so tired, you can be at the 45 looking down, open eyes, looking down.
yeah, yeah. Thank you.
It's good to see uh, that in the beginning of the meditation how your mind is.
Yeah, yeah. And pay attention, and it might change during, and so I've found also that it's helpful when I'm doing sesshin and sitting long hours, and sometimes you can like almost open your eyes, and oftentimes we would sit looking at the wall in Soto, and so when you're looking at the wall, just really focusing like you're like burning a hole through the wall, but is just a way of kind of being awake. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, thank you, Sandro. Kathy, how about you?
Interesting as I went through that exercise. I live in a downtown area, so there's noise around, trains and cars. And the first minute or so, I was really noticing it, and it was kind of distracting me. But like you said, focusing on the counting going up and down kind of helped me as I got more toward the end, that I was more blocking that out and able to focus more on just what I'm doing and what I'm feeling. So, um, so definitely a nice tip to kind of help me kind of laser focus a little bit more.
Great, great. Yeah, the Zendo that I practiced in was in downtown New York, the first Zendo. And I remember once we set up and we would sit for 2.5 or 3 hours, and this guy started tap dancing the second we sat down, like right outside the window, you know, and he tap danced until just about right when we were done. I was like, but there, so it is helpful, right, to be able to, again, we're not encouraging, don't block out, right, but learn to focus, you know, and that even in that noise, seeming noise, there's also silence, when you're sitting, you know. Yeah, yeah, good. Thank you, Kathy. How about you, Tyson?
Yeah, I enjoy sitting with eyes open, but scanning down and forward. Usually, if I'm online, I have a fixed point on the perimeter of my iPad, but if I'm in the Zendo, I look for a form in the floor, maybe a knot in the wood that becomes the focus point. And yeah, I enjoy counting down and counting up. I find my inhalation is a little shorter than my exhalation. But through repetition, it becomes very natural, and it's kind of like it's running itself from that point on.
Great, good.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'll need to depart before the top of the hour. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Richard?
Thank you for that. Yes, it was interesting to focus on your breath and also focus your eyes on a specific site. Even with an irritating kitchen clock that is perpetual for me, I was able to actually focus it out, and it was very comforting.
Mm.
I felt very relaxed at the end of the time period.
Great, good. Well, thank you. I'm glad. It's funny, I remember one time in jail, there was a young guy, he had terrible ADHD. And he said, I can't meditate, you know. And I said, it's okay, you don't have to, you know, just please sit quietly then, you know. And one time we did it, and he said, that was shorter. And I said, well, how do you know? And he said, well, because he had been counting the seconds on the clock. And I was like, what? You know, and you could barely hear this clock. It was like across the you know, noisy prison room that we were in. And I was like, well, I think maybe I need to learn something from you, because you obviously, you were meditating, you know. So anyway, those things that are distractions, you know, if we invite them in, and don't, because a lot of the time, so often we react like, oh, I can't do this with that crazy bird singing, you know, out there, or the tap dancer, or whatever it is, you know. We'll also do the same thing in life. And I don't know if any of you have noticed, like, life doesn't usually like serve itself up with exactly what you were hoping for. So getting used to that is a good practice. Yeah. So wonderful. Thank you. And I'm going to suggest for the second that we leave shikantaza out. So I'm going to suggest that what we do is we do the listening exercise. Yeah. And the listening exercise. Now, remember, like, there's no right or wrong, and you can do whatever you want when when the bell goes off. You know, you're a total, and when you're sitting, nobody is like policing you, right? So you find what works for you. I'm just trying to offer several different options on ways that can quiet you down. So, but how you get to quiet is, you know, and if you even get to quiet, as you said, Ian, you know, it's part of it is one of the big ways you get to quiet, I find for me, is by accepting when you're not there, you know, because if you struggle with it and try to force something onto it, it makes it much harder. So this practice of just listening, just really listening to everything around you without naming it, without trying to understand or figure it out, just listening, right? Deeply letting it all in. And that practice actually, in a big way, kind of becomes shikantaza, or can become shikantaza, because at the same time as you're listening, you're smelling, you're feeling the air, you know, around you, on your hands, on your head, on your, you know, on your body, right? You're feeling the weight of your body sitting on the cushion. You're feeling any aches and pains that you might have. And you're just going with that listening, you know, that listening. So I'm going to ring the bell again, and we'll do it for about 5 minutes, and then we'll check in again. And Tai-san, you can go when you need to go at any point. But and thank you for joining us. And here we go. when we go out on, I often go on these trips out west and spend time with Lakota elders, our bearing witness retreat out west. Take care, Tai-san. Thank you. One of the women who's a medicine woman, her name is Violet Catches. She's a wonderful woman. She's a really beautiful lady, and she was telling us about, as a little girl, how her grandmother would send her and her sisters down to the river, and she would tell them, find a rock and hold it in your hand and listen to it. And I remember bringing that into the jail, and the guys were like really moved by it, you know, like, listen to this rock, it's talking, you know. And it's something when you're holding it, you know. This rock that I'm holding is a fossil of a tree bark that I gave to my father when he was dying. And my father was, like I said, a socialist and an atheist, and he loved it. And he would hold it, and I would say, you know, what? Tell me what you're feeling when you hold it. And he said, you know, I just feel like I'm touching something that's so much bigger than me, but that I'm a part of it, you know. And it was so beautiful, you know. So I have this rock that I sometimes hold while I'm sitting, you know, and I listen to it. So, yeah, that's a practice of listening. And there's also a Theravadan monk named Ajahn Sumedho, and he teaches this practice of listen. He calls it the sound of silence. So if you really listen, there's like a ringing in your ear, right? It's always there. And he uses that ringing as a focus, as a form to focus on, that you focus on that ringing. And what's really amazing is if you're like on the subway or, you know, in a car or something, and that ringing is still there, you can hear it, and it brings you into this kind of feeling, you know, that feeling of awe, you know. So, Ian, how was listening?
I like that. It was maybe I'm just a little bit more calm after the first round, but that was a little bit easier for me. I did like that a bit.
Yep. And you know, sometimes it's good to go with what's easier. And sometimes it depends, right? As Sandro pointed out, like about keeping your eyes open or not, right? There are days when easy is what you're going for, you know, and so it's okay, you know, just to find that calm and to relax a little bit is good. It's great. So that's fine, you know, and then you just have to watch yourself and be honest with yourself, right? If you're now, it's not like breath counting is like super like you know, you're not going to get a shirt at the end like I counted my breaths to 10 and wear that around with great pride, you know. But so it's also good to remember that, right? But it's good sometimes in practice to push yourself a little bit, right? Beyond, we're so addicted to our comfort, you know, but that comfort sometimes comes at the expense of our full presence, or there's some things that we give up for that comfort, you know. Like as soon as we're done, I'm going to go eat dinner and probably sit down and watch a hockey game or something. That's kind of my comfort thing, right? I could also read, you know, I'm reading about 5 wonderful books, so I should probably read one of them, but yeah. So, you know, you find it, you being honest with yourself about it too is really important, you know, and seeing what's being called for. Yeah. How about you, Kathy?
Well, I think kind of on the same lines is, I think doing that first exercise kind of helped me a little bit more on this one. And also the tip, my eyes were kind of drifting around a little bit to really focus on something on the desk. And interesting that you mentioned the ringing in my ears, because I really noticed that this time.
Wow.
So it's funny that you mentioned that, but
Yeah.
yeah, it seemed pretty loud at some points.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's incredible. It's there all the time, right? He calls that the sound of silence. It's like this. I think it has something to do with the blood flowing through our veins or something like that. He wrote a whole book about it. So it's a real thriller. But it is a really it is an interesting practice. I like listening to that. Especially, I find it like when I'm at work or something and I'm in a tense situation, it's like a reminder that there's something bigger, right? And constant going on than, whatever I happen to be caught up in at work. Yeah. Sandro?
Yeah, it was okay for me.
Yeah. Good.
It's very gentle experience.
Nice. Do you in the practice that you do, the Tibetan practice that you do, a lot of visualizations?
No, I try to be open for the experience, and um, that it's because the instruction I think was very next to the uh, shamatha with um, how can I say, when you do shamatha with no focus, you don't focus on the breath or and the energy. You you have a open focus, and everything that comes.
Yeah.
The sounds, the everything.
Yeah. So that's shikantaza also. That's the very similar to the shikantaza practice, which is you're just aware, but it's not like you're not analyzing or figuring it out. It comes, it goes, you notice it, and then you notice the next thing that comes and goes.
Lama Santa used to call it to a shamatha with the focus on the presence, only
Yeah,
on the presence, the moment.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Richard.
I was more alert during that session. I tried to focus on the clock and I couldn't until I relaxed, and then I heard the clock.
uh,
But I was much more aware of what was around me and what I was feeling, what I was hearing in my body and such, and also the surroundings. I felt even more relaxed after that session than I did
Great.
after the first one. So thank you.
Oh yeah, you're very welcome. So one thing I would suggest is, and that I think is a little bit important to point out, right? It's good to check out different styles and different things and find what works, as we said, right? But there also is there was a wonderful teacher, a Rinzai teacher named Hakuin in the 18th century, Japanese teacher, and he said, if you want to get to the ocean, go out the door and make a left and just keep going straight. Don't turn around anywhere. Like just go straight and you'll hit the ocean no matter where you start out, right? And he also used to say, if you want to hit water, just dig a well in one spot. Don't dig lots of wells, like don't get frustrated. And so one of the instructions when we're practicing is not to jump around too much and try all kinds of different things, right? Find something that feels good and works, but then go with that for a while, right? Stick with it for a while and let your relationship with it develop, because it is a relationship that you develop with that practice and with yourself in that practice. And if you only, we have a tendency to be like, oh no, I want the, someone was telling, it was so funny. I went to get a haircut, first haircut I've had, and I've been bald since 2001 when I shaved my head. And my wife finally said to me recently, like, okay, you get to grow your hair now. I'd like to see it. You actually have hair, so go ahead and grow it. So, but I went to a barber for the first time in like 30 years, right? And he started telling me about how to meditate. This was out in Colorado. And he said, there's an app that you can use, and it puts one sound in one ear and one sound in the other ear. That's wonderful. Like, and it brings you right into a deep, samadhi state. And I was like, great. It's not too much our practice to jump around, right? A steadiness and building a relationship and going deep with finding a practice that, is one of these basic kind of solid practices. You can do any of the practices that we talked about for the rest of your life, and it will be fruitful and wonderful. It's okay to check out other things, but there are there are these apps and gimmicks that you can do. If you need them, let me know, and I'll put you in touch with Johnny in Colorado, the barber. But I recommend, dig your well, dig it deep, and you'll hit water. So that's how I'd like to end this. By wishing you all well. And if you have any questions or, ever want to get in touch, you can get in touch with me through Zen Peacemakers. You can just reach out and ask either Jim Hoden or Jeff or, and they can put you in touch with me. But, and any question, I think that that's also really important, and it's not something that we used to have, as I was saying in Zen. It was like there were no questions asked, and you just showed up, and there was something to that. But it's good to be able to ask questions too, So please feel free to reach out if anything ever arises. Yeah. So thank you. I dedicate the merits of being here with you today to all of your joy and well-being. And I hope you have a good afternoon, night, or morning, or whatever it is in your time area.